Hi everybody, I'm Anna McCarrow. This is my Magical People series, and today I am very, very pleased to be joined by Aepril. Hello, Aepril.
Hello, thank you for having me, Anna.
Oh, it's such a pleasure.
I'm so pleased to be here.
Oh, good. And would you like to introduce yourself, Aepril, please, for everyone?
My name's Aepril Shaley, and I am a witch. I'm an astrologer. I'm a poet. I'm a belly dancer. I've toured the United States and Europe belly dancing and teaching belly dance. Right now I'm focusing on writing poetry and doing
Lovely. And I know you as an astrologer primarily, but tell us a bit about, how did you come to astrology and witchcraft? That's probably quite a big question, isn't it, in the first place?
It's a huge question, but it's one because I think I know I love to hear everybody's path. Everyone comes to this differently, I think. For me, I definitely feel that I was born a witch. I think a witch is something that you make yourself or you're made as well as being born, but I think some of us were just kind of born like that. We go from there, and some of us come to it maybe later. I definitely early on in my life had a resistance to it when I was adult and late teen. And then one day I was attending I think it was a ritual at my college, my freshman year of college, and it kind of just broke through. And I remember just sobbing. It was run by a woman named Clyde so I just made the connection, like I had been rejecting it about myself to maybe to try to be safe, to try to stay safe in this world. Because maybe I have as a witch, maybe I think I've always just felt weird, and I was so trying to fit into things and make myself safe. And then when I had this breakthrough, it was like this dam broke, and I really became myself. I feel.
Yeah.
And just this conquering of the way that we are indoctrinated into being rational materialists who are, everything has to be logical and sort of this masculine way, this masculine path mind, right? And I let the nighttime mind in, and it's actually my natural habitat. So that was one breakthrough. And then and coming of age moment I got into because I had a friend named Drea who was into it when I was in school, and I was interested. I had a crush on somebody who was like a triple Scorpio, being my partner for a while. And I wanted to know more.
A triple Scorpio, that's a handful.
So, yeah, he's a very intense person. And he's still writing me now. This is like a long time ago. We haven't been together in a long time, and he posts them, and sure, whatever. But at the time I was obsessed, so I wanted to know more. And I found out more, and then I was like, "Ooh, this is a key into knowing more about people." Sort of emotionally immature motivations, right? And then, of course, as I've matured, something much more profound than crushes and relationships. But relationships are, of course, they matter too, right?
Yeah, of course.
So silly and stupid. It's just that, the level that it was at the time is different than the level it's at now in terms of how I relate to people and partners, and so.
I imagine as an astrologer, you must get asked about relationships a lot. Is it kind of the most popular topic for people, or?
No, clients that I tend to attract, most of my clients and querents want to know more about themselves. They want to know why happened in their lives the way that they've happened. I because I think that part of my life's work out of the dark goddess as a plot and shadow work, I attract other Plutonians, as I call us, the Plutonian Club. One of my clients actually called us the people for Persephone.
Nice.
Because, you know, we're the people who maybe signed up for like the Master Jedi training in terms of like deep, dark, underworldy stuff. And so I tend to attract people who want to dive into that and know, find that geography in their own psyches. Like, what is this real? Is there meaning behind this? Like, what's happening to me? So that's one of my missions as an astrologer is, yes, this is real. You're not insane. Like, there's a reason for it. For some reason, there's this fated path for you to do this shedding of skin over and over again, sheddings of skins to, we don't know what the ends is, for wisdom, for connection, for like Persephone does go into the underworld and come out, she becomes world. We all have that maybe in our personal mythology. So
that's the whole area is so fascinating. I can only imagine how much kind of study and depth there is in that for you as a practitioner of astrology. I mean, I'm an enthusiastic, you know, amateur. Well, I'm not an astrologer, but you know, I find it interesting. But that's as far as it goes. I can imagine there's a lot of study there.
A lot of, say that again, a lot of
study involved. Yeah,
I got it. A lot of study there. Yeah, there is, and it came easily to me. And I do hold the belief, for various reasons that experiential reasons, that I came to astrology from past lives. Like I feel that I came into the world with that. I feel that that's part of what the maybe the fear of claiming my witchcraft was, that I had been persecuted for this before, because it was a really big fear in me. But learning astrology was very easy for me. I just sort of did it because of interest. The motivation came very organically to learn. My path has been very much modern psychological, although now I'm incorporating more Hellenistic and medieval aspects to astrology into what I do, which I think gives it so much more depth and so many things. It's a really exciting time in astrology right now in that respect. But some of my favorite astrologers, Liz Green, you know, who wrote the Astrology of Fate, which is all about Pluto. And you know, when you read that book, it's like, you know, sometimes it's like, what is she even talking about? It's of connection and intensity, you know, and it's like you have to read it like 1,000 times to really get it.
Yeah, but worth 1,000 times of reading, definitely. So
yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Also, I think it's, while we're on the subject, pertinent to note that I think you're a Taurus as well, aren't you? I'm a Taurus. This is a lovely, we're just having a lovely Taurus experience right now.
Taurus sisters, here we go. Yeah, definitely.
Anyway, but so Aepril, can you tell me about your magical practice, and tell me about it in whichever way you would like to, but what does it look like maybe on a daily basis, and what are your kind of overall beliefs and structures, if you like?
Well, practices include on most days. Now, I definitely skip it sometimes to my detriment, but my daily practices include first thing in the morning, where I center myself in my heart. I find that the quality of life that I experience day to day, if I do that, even if it's just, it makes a huge difference to the way that I approach the rest of my day. Given that I am, I think, naturally a more heart-centered person, It puts me in my own element to start the day. And then my magical practice, I feel, centers around my art making into nature. So I reserve rituals for bigger moments, for the hinges of the wheel, for the moons. I do like a more of a, I'm gonna do a ritual now and like do that kind of work. But my magical practice, I think, is every day. It's woods with my dog, and he's showing me again and again how we live in the moment and how present time thing you have, and the world is a miracle every single day, and you know, you can go to the same park every day and it's different. It is for him. So then he's my teacher, looking at that and communicate, and the trees there, and you know, I spend time putting my hands on the trees, and listening, you know, with my body, and you know, hearing. I say hearing, it's hard to say like what sense I'm using exactly.
Yeah,
it's that sixth sense, right? But I'm hearing what's being communicated with me, connecting to the land, taking pictures of things and then making art, you know, from that sort of spontaneous art, writing poems. I go out into the woods, and sometimes the music in the wind and that's prompts me to dance while I'm in the woods and the forest, see if I have enough, if nobody's there. You know? So it's for me, my daily practice is very organic. It's very visceral, feeling things as things are happening, so that I'm feeling my aliveness, right? And connecting to the intelligence of the earth, right?
Yeah. What it's conjuring up a lot of really lovely images of you dancing, especially the dancing in the woods, which having sort of followed you on Facebook and things for some time, sometimes I know that you post lovely pictures of you doing just that as well. And I know that you did talk about that you are a belly dancer as well, and teach dance, and a kind of performance artist, I think, as well.
I would say that's like the more all-encompassing word for what I do is performance art, because even reading poetry is that, dance is that, and belly dancer, like specifically, that's what I was doing for many years. I had dance pieces that I would perform, and then I would teach workshops around dance technique, but also I always felt like I was kind of an undercover agent for spiritual transformation through these workshops. Like I'd be like, we're gonna learn dance, but no, we're gonna use dance to like, you know, exactly. So, and then, but it would like draw people in, and then, you know, maybe have a lot of Mercury in my chart, but it would draw people in, and then they would be like, oh, I do see why this is important, and continue to come back. So it was working, right? But then as things have gone along, for me to claim my, you know, my MFA, I have a master's degree in interdisciplinary art. So for me, it's really important to work with many different, bring that together in a common theme for what I'm trying to convey. So I found belly dance to be a little bit too limiting for me. Like I had to just sort of market myself a certain way, and eventually my psyche sort of rebelled. Big identity crisis, which maybe I'm still having.
No.
Then, but I feel like artistically much freer, and it's much more integrated within my spiritual practice and my astrology, and try to bring those things together. You know, I think in capitalism, there's a strong pressure to each market, and then you only do that.
Oh, I so
and
understand that. Yeah.
That's shitty. Yeah. I don't think that's good for us, especially for more about the connections between things rather than, I think for some people maybe that works. It doesn't for me. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think as a writer, I particularly understand that, because that's how publishing works, in that, especially if you've been reasonably successful with one thing, they kind of want you to stay there and do more of that thing, which is great if that's what you want to do. And quite often that does work out really well, but then it can be difficult to move genres and things, but also kind of mix genres and move outside your genre and things like that. There are, lots of genre rules, and it's all kind of, as you say, basically capitalism based, in that it's a product, a lot of the time. So
right.
yeah, it's quite interesting. I mean, it's an art, I think it's that interesting juxtaposition between where you have an art form and you have the market, and where they meet. Yeah, an interesting one. Thank you. So, and I was going to ask you just a little bit about sort of gods as well, Aepril, because we talked a little bit about astrology and Persephone and the journey to the underworld and things. But during your life, have you worked particularly with particular gods and goddesses, and what might they be, if so?
Yes, absolutely. I feel that overall my main calling is to the dark goddess. And I remember when I first came across that concept, I don't remember exactly who introduced that concept, but I remember again, another coming of age moment, another awakening moment where I was like, that's what I'm doing. That's the name for what I'm her sort of agent in this world, or one of them. There's many of us, right? But I'm one of them. And I remember as a teenager seeing crows on the green grass and feeling this pull toward them, like they were just so beautiful to me. And of course that's like super goth and whatever, you can dismiss it as that. But now I realize, like, living in Ireland as I do now, for the Morrigan is much more powerful. And she was always an important goddess to me. And it's the relationship that I have to her, the Irish, she's an Irish goddess. She's a face of Ireland. She's a face of the land here, but yet different in different places. So in the United States, she's very different than she is here, which I've found, but yet she's the same goddess. It's just another dimension of her. So focused around the folklore and the tradition of how she appears in the source materials and etc. And but there was this Irish diaspora that happened, and these seeds went all over the world. And so I think of like Neil Gaiman's American Gods, that they take a different, they're the same entity, same root entity, but they take a different form in different lands, right? So the relationship I'd had to Morrigan was more this Irish American version of her, right?
Yeah.
When I've come here, and her radio signal is quite different, and my experiences of longer, the communications, and she'll speak to me in what I think is Irish. I went into the Morrigan's cave I think it was the first Samhain I was here. It's in Roscommon, the county Roscommon. You have to crawl into the cave. My husband had done this initiation rite at one point, and so he waited outside for me as I crawled in. You crawl through a birth, or you're going back to the womb. And there's actually an Ogham, the ancient Irish alphabet inscription on the cave. And I went in, and speaking to me in all these different, in English, but also in different languages. So I've learned through her prompting that she was telling me basically I need to learn Irish. and just gave me these messages, and that again, it's like a radio signal. It was just so much stronger. And so the Morrigan, so one that's very controversial. A lot of people want to take ownership of her and define her for themselves, and there's cultural implications around that as well. But Lilith, goddess, that's very important to me, and her story of exile and being othered. I've found that I've experienced that a lot. You know, and her eroticism problem for patriarchal world, and I feel that intensely as well. And I feel that these goddesses come from a similar root, from an exploration standpoint, not from a cultural one. So I'm always trying to create that balance of cultural awareness and this awareness and exploration, right?
Yeah.
But there's that root, and that's where I feel like my calling exists, is in that root of the different expressions: Persephone, Lilith, Morrigan, you know, Medusa, all these goddesses. You know, if I were to decide only one, it just would never work. Right.
There's so much rich variety, as you say, and that expression of the dark feminine, which we really seems to have come into its own in the past, I don't know, would you say 20 years? Fairly recently, even within sort of witchcrafty circles. I was reading a book a while ago by one of my favourite occult authors, Stuart Farrar. He wrote quite a lot of non-fiction books around witchcraft in the 80s with his wife Janet, which I'm sure you know, and but he wrote fiction as well. And so he wrote one called The Serpent of Lilith under another name, Margot Villiers, in fact, under a lady's name, which is hilarious. And it's an occult novel. It's really good, and in that there's a real dichotomy between the bright goddess and the dark goddess, and that at that point Lilith, the dark goddess, is really quite kind of vilified even by a practicing witch at that time. I say vilified, but not very she's very much the baddie in it, which is interesting. Yeah, it's a great read.
A lot of that comes from, we've all been raised in a, I want to say, patriarchal culture. It's definitely that, but that's not the only definition for it in a time, right? And our culture wants things to stay the same. It wants order. It wants definition. It wants everything to be angles and different than that, and hierarchical. So anything that invites change or mystery or challenge in that respect, whether it's witchcraft itself, even within witchcraft, people they're gravitating toward witchcraft. They take ownership of it, but still have a problem with it and have an inner conflict around it. So maybe the story is sort of illustrative of that conflict, right? That's the first thought that I have anyway.
Yeah, I think so. It's just interesting how philosophy develops over time and within the context of the culture at large, as you say, and things are much more people, I guess, are more aware of cultural differences and things, and also, cultural appropriation, as you mentioned a little bit as well now. And yeah, I think we're evolving down a path. It's just quite interesting to see about the dark goddess, particularly as threatening to men, and anyway, it's a very we could talk about that all day. But Aepril, but we won't. Aepril, we talked about books, and I usually And you're a poet also, as well as an artist. And I usually ask people to talk about maybe some books or films or resources that they think are really interesting and useful. I know you've got some show and tell beside you to show. So go ahead.
I do.
Yes.
And that's mainly because as I said earlier, I'll forget if I leave in front of me, because in my mind, the books, like all the information sort of swirls around and as this, these different ideas that have connections with each other. So it's my due diligence and give credit where it's due. I have to have it concretely. But this, there's one book, there's one book that I'm really into right now. My poetry mentor, her name is Sasha, and she was like, you need to have this book, and she's writing this book. And to me, this book is so much magic. It's Technicians of the Sacred. It's been around a long time.
Oh yeah, it's a great book. Yeah.
It's familiar with this?
Jerome Rothenberg, right?
Yeah, so it's the third edition of it, Jerome Rothenberg, and it has poetry that is it doesn't have explanation in it much, from all different times, cultures, eras in the world, and also modern poetry that is sacred and that's magical. And to me, this is just magical arts right here, it's just beautiful. So there's so many different poems in here, and so I'll use this as like fluency too, like where I'm just like, okay, what do I need to know? And I just open the book and read like the first line as a form of divination.
Yes.
So I find this book very precious.
Oh, lovely. Yes, I remember that book.
As a writer, right? Certain books you're like, this is my precious book. I love this book. It's like the one you go back to all the time.
Yes, for sure.
So
I remember that book from my master's, in fact, because I did mine in kind of avant-garde and poetics, and Jerome Rothenberg came up in that.
okay.
Yeah, that was really interesting. And do you have anything else that you would like to show us? That's a great recommend.
Sure. I don't have another book I don't have I have other books here, but I don't have the book with me right now. But I wanted to mention Redgrove's book, The Black Goddess and the Unseen Real. It's a little bit dated now, given like what we were just talking about, some of the cultural considerations, some of the gender considerations that today. It was written, I think, in the 90s, but beautiful book, and it's very hard to find. It's kind of rare, but it's like even though it's written in prose, to me, he wrote this long poem of the dark goddess, and it's one of those books that you have to read. You can't go to it for, not like an academic book, although he's academically informed. It's more, you have to sort of take it in little bite-sized pieces and meditate on it, value. So he really does a beautiful job of speaking about the dark goddess as a visceral experience rather than a concept, and something that you have to you experience her through your experiences in your body and your non-visual senses. Also dark, right? The darkness is the non-visual, the like you're out in the woods in the middle of the night and your perception is changed, as opposed to you being out in the middle of the city and during the day. But that's where the wisdom is. So it's the book that I also recommend.
That's great. Could you repeat the title and the author again, just for people who may be wanting to look that up?
Called The Black Goddess and the Unseen Real, and it's by Peter Redgrove.
Okay, great, thank you. I think this is also a good time to mention, so your Patreon and what you do, just bringing it back to you, Aepril. So, well, tell people about that. How can they connect with you further?
So I am on Patreon at April's Astrology. And so that's where I really give my candid readings, my weekly readings on the astrology. I offer those once a month on YouTube as well, at April's Astrology on YouTube. But the Patreon is where I really like raw deal on what's going on, and get really into it in detail, as well as sharing my art making process and all that kind of stuff. For those who are interested, you can come in. And then I'm also on Instagram at 2 Instagram accounts. I have April's Arcana is the astrology account, and then also April Raven, the poetry readings and all of that. And I hope to have a book of poems out by Samhain this year.
Lovely.
Published.
Yeah.
That is my goal, little packet of poems now. And I'm like, it feels like a chapbook. This is good.
Yeah.
So hopefully I'll have it published.
Oh, excellent. Well, I'll look out for that for sure. That's really exciting. Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. I think, well, I could certainly ask you a lot more, but this is a good introduction to you and what you're all about. And people can follow you on Patreon. I would really recommend April's astrology video. She's really interesting and I find really helpful to watch. So thank you, Aepril, for that. And lovely to see you.
So good to see you, Anna. Thank you so much for it's an honor to be interviewed by you, and your questions are beautiful and intelligent, and I really appreciate that. So thank you.
Thank you very much. My goodness.
As are you.
I love it. Okay, well, thank you. What a way to end. We're ending on a high there, and yeah, thank you so much, Aepril. It's been a real pleasure.